All right, let's dive into today's news from the Faroe Islands. We've got a lot to cover, from politics to weather to even a bit of sports.
Sounds good.
First up, the weather has been pretty wild. We had a Kalandi stormer blow through with some seriously strong winds, like up to 51 meters per second.
Yeah, there have been a bunch of reports, something like 40, of wind and water damage, mostly in Klaksvik.
Oh, wow, that's rough.
Schools and daycare centers there are closed for the day.
Makes sense.
And they're expecting some ferry disruptions and cancellations, too.
And I saw that bus routes 5 and 6 in Tórshavn are suspended this morning as well.
Right. Now, onto some political news. There's been a shakeup at KVF, the National Broadcasting Service.
Oh,
The Kringvarpsstjórin, the director general, has been fired.
what happened?
Well, it seems he illegally exempted someone from paying the broadcasting fee, the Kringvarpsstråd.
Mm.
Apparently, there was some sort of threatening incident involved, but the KVF board saw it as a breach of trust.
So who's taking over?
Katrin Peterson will be the interim director.
Got it. And we also had some local elections recently, right?
That's right. On Viareie, Marita Sundberg is staying on as Borgarstjóri, with Hans Jakob Karlsberg as her deputy.
Okay.
And get this, there's been a report of alleged election fraud, Valsvik. It's the first time it's ever been reported.
Wow, really?
Yeah, the police are investigating, but there aren't many details out yet.
Okay, well, we'll have to keep an eye on that one. Now, for a bit of, let's say, everyday news, that FO gas station on Sandoy,
Oh, yeah.
they accidentally sold some bad fuel.
Oh, no.
Yeah, a few cars ended up breaking down because of it.
Yikes. Have they fixed the problem?
They closed the pump for now.
Makes sense.
Now for some good news. They're planning to build a new church in Glyvrar.
Oh, wow.
Pretty big project. They say it'll cost around 100 million kroner.
That's quite an investment. When do they think it will be finished?
They're aiming to start construction next year and be done by 2027.
That's exciting. I'm sure the community will be happy to have a new church.
Now, on to sports. The Faroes women's national handball team has been playing in the European Championship.
How did they do?
They had a tough match against Denmark. Didn't manage to pull off a win.
Right.
But it was their best result against Denmark yet. It's pretty cool.
That's great to hear. So what happened in the game?
Well, they had some trouble with their shooting accuracy
Oh.
and ended up falling behind by 7 goals.
7 goals. That's a tough deficit to overcome.
Exactly. But they kept fighting.
Yeah.
And Annika, the goalkeeper, she's been amazing.
Oh, yeah.
She's got the 3rd highest number of saves in the final stage of the whole competition.
Wow. That's incredible. She must be a real asset to the team.
Absolutely.
Maybe.
She's been a standout player. Now, back to politics. There's some debate happening around funding for living expenses.
What's going on?
They're thinking of stopping it, and some members of the welfare committee, particularly the opposition, aren't happy about it.
Why is that?
They're saying it's like an attack on families, putting a lot of them in a tough spot.
That makes sense. What's the reasoning behind the cuts?
Apparently, the government wants to save about 3 million kroner, but the critics are arguing that this is going to disproportionately affect people with disabilities, making it harder for them to work and be a part of the community.
That's a valid concern. It's important to consider the impact on all members of society.
Definitely. Now, let's talk about economics. The banks in the Faroe Islands had a much better year in 2023 compared to the year before.
Really? That's great. What contributed to that?
Well, they've recently reduced interest rates,
Right.
and that seems to have helped. And there are predictions that Føroyar might distribute as much as 700 million kroner in dividends over the next 3 years.
Wow. That's a very positive sign.
For sure. Now, shifting gears to some international news, Amnesty International has come out with a report that claims Israel is committing genocide against Palestinians in Gaza.
That's a serious accusation.
It is. They point to the high number of Palestinian casualties. And with the ongoing conflict and the humanitarian crisis there, the situation remains very tense.
It's truly heartbreaking.
It is. Now, in other international news, Romania just released some documents that show Russia was meddling in their presidential election.
Oh, wow. How were they doing that?
They were running disinformation campaigns, trying to manipulate public opinion. The classic playbook.
That's concerning. It undermines the democratic process.
Exactly. Now, back to local news. There's an update on the pilot whale hunt. So far this year, they've caught 2,350 pilot whales.
Okay. And there's talk about building the world's first ship tunnel.
Yes. In Norway, though. But it could have a big impact on the Faroe Islands, too.
How so?
We'll have to wait and see, but it's definitely something to watch.
For sure.
Now, remember that complaint the MEGD, the Faroes Association of Disabled People, filed against KVF?
Yes, alleging discrimination. Right.
Well, the Broadcasting Council has decided not to take any action on it.
Interesting. Okay, what else is going on?
They've also introduced a new pre-approval system for the shipyards that are building the Kalsoy ferry.
Oh, is there a reason for that?
Mainly to make sure everything's up to snuff, quality control and all that.
Makes sense.
And over on Sandoy, people are gathering signatures against the proposed road alignment for the Suri-Roy Tunnel.
What are their concerns?
They're worried about the environmental impact.
Right.
On a lighter note, remember Clintremus?
Clintremus.
The Faroes Mickey Mouse. Well, he's back on store shelves just in time for Christmas.
That's fun. I bet people are happy about that.
I'm sure they are. Now, there's been some talk about price equalization for duty-free goods, but the government says they're not planning on doing that.
Why not?
They're worried it might hurt tax revenue.
Ah, that makes sense.
And unfortunately, the FM transmitter on Skadi in Sørvágur is on the fritz.
Oh, dear. What happened?
It just stopped working. So, no radio for the people in that area for now.
That's too bad. Hopefully they can fix it soon.
Hopefully. And remember the protest at the ferry terminal in Nolsoy?
The one about the changes to the ferry schedule?
Yep, that one. It's going to court now.
Oh, wow. So it's getting serious.
It is. And just a heads up, there have been some hackers targeting Facebook pages in the Faroe Islands, both for companies and individuals.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so everyone stay vigilant and keep your online accounts secure.
Good advice.
Now they're asking for more money to renovate the Parliament building?
Really?
But with the budget being tight, I don't know if they'll get it.
We'll have to see how that plays out.
Exactly. Oh, and there's a new report out about the MBG refund scheme.
Yeah.
The one that gives you money back for the VAT you paid on building materials.
Yeah, I know the one.
Well, they're saying it might actually be driving up construction costs.
Oh, that's interesting. I wouldn't have expected that.
Me neither. It's a bit counterintuitive.
Oh.
But anyway, we got a few more news bits to go over before we wrap up this section of our deep dive.
Okay, what else is happening? Well, there's this new clothing brand that's getting some attention. It's called Prosjekt, BRYNJ.
Oh, cool. What's it all about?
They're doing some really unique designs, and they're all about local craftsmanship.
That's fantastic. Supporting local businesses is always a good thing.
Definitely. And there's been some discussion about the Faroes language, especially when it comes to library funding.
Oh, what's happening there?
There's this proposal to give more people a share of the funding, but some are worried it could mean less money for authors who write in Faroes.
That's a tricky situation. It's important to support both local authors and the wider community.
Absolutely. On a happier note, the Faroes swimmers have been doing really well at the Nordic Championships.
That's great.
Yeah, they've been getting personal bests all over the place.
Fantastic. Always love to hear about Faroes athletes doing well.
Me too. Oh, and there's been an update on that investigation involving Dennis Holm.
Oh, right. The one with Arnie Skyle.
Yeah, that one. They've appointed Christina Samuelson to investigate.
Okay. And just to remind everyone, what was the complaint about?
Well, Arniskele is accusing Dennis Holm of some shady dealings when it comes to mackerel quotas.
Right. Well, I guess we'll see what comes of the investigation. So that's pretty much it for today's news. What do you think? Anything in particular that stood out to you?
It's always interesting to see what's happening in the Faroe Islands, From the weather to politics to sports, it's a real mix.
It really is. It just goes to show how dynamic life is here, And I'm always amazed by how resilient the people are, no matter what challenges they face.
You're absolutely right. It makes you wonder what tomorrow's news will bring.
Well, we covered a lot today. Everything from crazy weather to political drama to local stories, and even international news. Feels like we took a whirlwind tour of everything happening in the Faroe Islands today.
It really does. Anything in particular that stood out to you? I mean, it'll be fascinating to see how these stories develop, and how they end up shaping the future of the Faroes.
I think what really strikes me is how connected everything is. I mean, the weather obviously has a huge impact on everyday life, and then you have political decisions that create all these ripple effects. And even what's happening internationally ends up having local consequences. It's a good reminder that the Faroes are part of this bigger global picture.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it also highlights how resilient and adaptable the Faroes people are. I mean, they're constantly navigating all these complex issues.
Absolutely. Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the news from the Faroe Islands for today. We'll be back soon to unpack even more headlines, so keep an eye out for that. Until then, stay curious and stay connected.